Everyone, we're back with another Intel Arc A380 video. So we should at this point already have a review online. Definitely check it out. It's linked below. Today we're going to be taking this card apart. And this card, from what Intel has told us, should end up probably in the $130 to $140 price range. If you buy it in a pre-built today from China and ship it, which we did, the entire pre-built was about maybe $600 or $700 max, something like that, and that included all the other parts plus the card. So they should be pretty close to that price range at least. Just for reference, we have some other $150-ish cards on the table here. This is a 1050 Ti, and this is a recent card. This is the Thanks, I Hate It video card. It's an RX 6400. I spent $160 on this. It's unbelievably insulting. Now, I don't know if the A380 is going to be any good right now today, but the review will tell you. And today we're going to at least take it apart and figure out how it is mechanically for thermal design and for the VRM design, PCB, and everything else. Let's get started. Before that, this video is brought to you by EVGA's X570 Dark motherboard. The EVGA X570 Dark is a high-end motherboard for AM4 CPUs, built around extreme overclocking and tested heavily by EVGA's Kingpin. The X570 Dark has a uniquely rotated socket and RAM layout, 90-degree rotated cables for ease of installation and management, and tons of troubleshooting features to make building, testing, and overclocking easier. Check out EVGA's X570 Dark high-end motherboard at the link in the description below. Today we are going to be going into the Unkonw and opening an Intel A380 Arc GPU. It is the Photon brand for, it's made by Gunnir, and the specific model is Photon. It is an A3. As a reminder, the nomenclature for Arc is A3, A5, A7, and it's sort of ascending there in the market position, just like i3, i5, i7, simple enough. A380 is going to be the one currently available. A750 is the one that we saw in our studio and showed running, but we're not allowed to benchmark yet, and also not allowed to hang on to. So that'll be the next one to look for. So for screws, very simple so far. 4 screws. What we're going to be looking at today is overall construction, build quality, and general sort of thermal design. Now this, other than the obvious reasons it matters, like not sucking as a product, is also important because if you look at the competitive landscape, there's something we were noticing where you have a card that, let's just assume Intel said it's $130 to $140, take them at their word, even if you add 20 bucks. Again, this was a $150 to $160 purchase that I made. And even just in the fan, you can see the quality. I like that sometimes it doesn't spin because it catches. And we've got basically no heat sink at all. So this costs about the same. There is something to be said where if the 6400 GPU, the actual silicon, outperforms this, then it's obviously a bunch of looks for nothing. But at least in terms of card quality, objectively, this is a better cooler. It's just, you can put this on the 6400, it's still a better cooler at least. So in the very least, this brand Gunnir has built a pretty high-end cooler for a card that's fairly cheap, because even if you go back to 2016 or 17 and look at 1050s and 1050 Ti's, this is what you got. It's a little bit closer to this than the slap in the face we get today from AMD and XFX, but it's still quite distant, and it's a pretty simple, just aluminum fin stack with, I don't know, maybe 3 millimeters of height on the fins, not particularly high-end. And then as one final reminder, this is a card that is, it's an Intel DG1, so this is an actual Intel GPU, but it's basically a discrete laptop GPU strapped to a PCB, and it's just a passive cooler. This came in a pre-built system from CyberPower that we sort of bought off the market when Intel silently launched it. We ran a whole separate video on this if you're curious how this performs, but that is Intel's most recent previous experience in video card cooler design, and this one is the next venture. Now, Intel has its own basically sort of Founders Edition equivalent types of cards that we'll be launching. This is by a board partner, but we'll be looking at other board partner models, I'm sure, soon enough, like from Asus most likely. It'll be early. So 4 screws initially. Let's track these just in case this gets more complicated. Let's track these on the mod mat. If you would like one of our PC building mod mats and work surfaces, you can go to store.gamersaccess.net. It helps us out directly and helps fund our testing and our independent coverage, where we can sort of self-fund everything with the help of you all. And also you get a great working service with wiring diagrams, grids for screw tracking, and more. So far we're up to only 6. So 2-fan design. Blade density is not too crazy on this one. The A750, we noticed there were a ton of blades on that. So on this one, a little more standard. This is just plastic, and it doesn't feel particularly high-end, not that that's really super relevant. For the fin stack, it comes all the way across. The plastic here is actually not blocking the fin stack in this area, which is good. We've seen that mistake a lot, where manufacturers will bring down the shroud cover past the fin stack and basically trap the air, give it nowhere to escape. There's a little bit of trapping here going on with the air, but that's going to be an LED embellishment, and then some more fins over on this side. There's one heat pipe we can see currently. We'll see if there's more once we get in there. And for the PCB, you can see it stops pretty early. The card itself continues on to accommodate that second fan. So they could cut this down to a single fan design if they wanted to and run it closer to that 1050 Ti we were looking at. And then on the back, there's a metal backplate. Hopefully there's a thermal pad in there just to make use of the surface area. I don't know that there will be one. And then you can also see they've included a tire mark in case you feel that way about the card when you're done with it and you want to drive over it, and then you can claim that, I don't know, it came that way, I guess. I'm not sure why else you would put tread marks on your video card, but we could ask ASUS for a second opinion. This one, I think, this has either been opened before or these are very loose, so we'll see what we get when we open it. You can see this hooks over the back plate, so that makes me a little bit uncomfortable. It might come out cleanly. Oh, this is actually going to be really easy. So just to show you what I'm looking at here, there's 2 connectors here. One is, I think, for both fans into one header. We'll look at that closer. And one is for that LED, that RGB LED. So we'll look closer at that. I'm just trying to safely disconnect these right now so we don't rip the connector off the board with it. Whoa. I don't like these connectors in particular. These are the annoying kind where they have little plastic pins basically engraved into the, like jammed into the connector itself. Got one of them. Okay, worst connectors in the world are removed. That's Gunnir's choice over here. One thing to immediately draw attention to is going to be the PCIe slot. We talked about this in the review and in another video, but what they're doing is they're running a PCIe Gen 4x8, and unfortunately that means the entirety of this slot is not populated with traces actually going to it. You can see that the pins are there, but you look over here, and we've only got half of the slot actually in use, which is because if you want to actually make use of the whole PCIe slot, then you do have to have the space allocated on the silicon to accommodate by 16, which they don't. They needed to cut down size for cost saving on the silicon, fit other things, etc. So that's why that changes there. As for how much that impacts performance, we'll talk about that in separate benchmarking pieces. As of this recording, I'm actually not sure. I don't have an opinion on it yet for this card. It can be a problem with PCIe Gen 3 boards and running only a x8. But anyway, this is something we'll look at more later, but wanted to just point out why half of the traces here are not populated. What do we see? Let's start with the cooler. Obviously, very small contact patch for the actual, for the paste, for the actual die. We'll look at the die in a moment. And there's some guide markers over here for the memory. And then it's really simple. This is very straightforward. So it's all aluminum. There's no copper here except for the heat pipe. So you can see a copper heat pipe that's nickel plated over here, and it's just one heat pipe that does this S shape through the whole thing. And in terms of what that's doing, it's really just running right through the middle of the die, which they could do 2 heat pipes here and be in pretty good shape, but it's just honestly like, it's not necessary. There's enough surface area elsewhere. And the paste is making contact between the rest of the aluminum plate and the die. So this heat pipe is not passing through the memory except for here. So it's getting the top memory module. I'll show you that in the same orientation. So it is taking care of this memory module, and then these are left to be dealt with just by the cold plate for the rest of the cooler. It's pretty straightforward. The cold plate itself, or actually the entire aluminum fin stack itself, is designed in a way where the fins aren't perforated all the way through, and so you end up with this solid aluminum block at the bottom and no airflow to the board itself. So this card is low end enough and low power enough that it may not be realistically a problem, but one of the things we like to say is if you can make something better and there's really no meaningful additional cost change, it's just kind of a design change, then you should. And in this instance, what they're doing is using a lot more material and completely obstructing any chance for the air from these 2 fans to get down into the board, which means that your VRM, which is not directly heat sinked anywhere to any of this, is basically left to fend for itself. Now, that can be okay if it's low enough power. We'll have to wire this up. I don't know if we did that in our review at this point or not, because I'm filming this out of order, but the way to know would basically be to wire it up with thermocouples and see how the VRMs fare without any airflow and without any direct cooling. If they're high enough MOSFETs or high enough end MOSFETs in the stack, then it's okay, but it just depends on what they're using. So anyway, there is no direct voltage regulator module heat sinking going on. You can see 2 stages of a VRM up here. There's another one at least down here. It looks like there might be, there's another portion of VRM over here. And the model name on the FET is I think it's an MP52147, 2 of those. That's cute too. They've even rebranded the voltage controller to have their product name on it, even though they don't make it. That is pretty uncommon. So, heatsink's very simple. Let's go ahead and take this out the rest of the way before we look further at the PCB. Okay, fin stack's completely free. So here's a look at the this monstrosity of what they're doing in here. All they're doing is bridging 2 fans into one, is that 8-pin? Okay, I see what's happening. This is kind of a weird way to do it, but they're bridging these in a way just so that they can use PWM to control both fans, even though there's clearly 2 discrete cables. So this is just a choice of simplifying the board to make it 1 connector. That's a lot of pins instead of 2 connectors that are 4 pins each. And what they're doing is they're running these 4 PWM wires, looks like standard wiring, into something to merge it. And they're using, half of one side. And then on the other side, they're running 2 wires out of some of these holes so they can run it all into this header that connects to the board. So that's all fan control. And then this is RGB LEDs at the top. And this is just 3 wires for that. And that gets soldered in up here. So pretty simple for this. Now the fans are branded as, I think that says G Tecotherm, it looks like. And the model, it's 12 volt, 0.5 amp fans. These are 6 watt fans at most. Okay, now onto the board and the rest of the cooler. So here's the top of the cooler, what it actually looks like under the shroud. It's pretty good surface area. They've done top to bottom orientation, and they have side channels cut in here so that some of the air can exhaust, get out the sides. But for the most part, you're going to be exhausting into the motherboard slot and then up and out. So you don't want to be too close to glass with this, but otherwise this is very standard. This is how most cards are designed. Just normally they have a higher density of fins per inch. In this one, the fins themselves are fairly large, which is useful in a passive design. This is not one, but it's also not too relevant for the performance level of the card we're talking about. So these are 0.5 millimeter thick fins, a little bit wider than what we see on higher end designs. But again, you have to put into perspective of what we're cooling. And for what we're cooling, it is this thing. I need alcohol. Okay, alcohol acquired, 91%, just like we like it. So this is going to reveal the actual die size. I should look at this a little closer. A little bit of yellowing around the edges. I don't think that really means anything. But, oh, there you go. It's the color of what they're using to bond the substrate with the silicon. Small piece of silicon with no labeling on it, which is completely fine. AMD does the same thing. NVIDIA labels theirs, but it doesn't really matter other than identity for it. So this is approximately 13 millimeters. These numbers are not going to be exact because what we're doing is just educating point here. This top layer is called the diffusion barrier. It is not technically actually down to the silicon yet. That's a little bit further still. And so we're not getting the true silicon measurement, but we can get kind of close enough. So that is roughly like 12.8 to 3 or so. And this one is really about the same. It's roughly square. Very small die for this A380, but the 3, as we said earlier, indicates the low end of the stack. That is somewhat expected. Let's just give some context here. I haven't actually opened this, nor have I used it, as you can see. We had another RX 6400 we bought that was, we felt like a higher quality representation of it to give it a better chance in benchmarking. Spoiler alert, sometimes it doesn't matter how good of a chance you give. But let's just, for sake of comparison, now this is apropos nothing, so we're not using benchmarks to make the meaningful comparison here. We're just looking at the silicon. Wow, that was alarmingly painless. Oh, we're gonna leave that on. So, much denser board. I mean, you could maybe feasibly see how Intel could, or their board partner in this case, could pack all of this down. Gunnir could pack all of this down into a maybe smaller form factor, but not much smaller. And at some point, you're going to sacrifice cooling capabilities and overall board quality, VRM quality. So it's the cutoffs they make. But the architecture underneath is what will dictate the ultimate performance. This one, you can see there's this copper slug coming out. It's a cold plate, basically, that's typically soldered. You can do welding also into the heat pipe, and they're using a flat heat pipe here. These are much less efficient per area, but the thing is you can fit them in smaller areas. That's the only reason you would do that. It's basically so you don't have to make a dual slot card in this instance. So very different cooling design, as you can see. For the rest, so let's go ahead and just show the memory. I think this is GDDR6. We will find out. Yes, this is Samsung memory. It is G6. We've got 3 total modules on the board. I don't think there's going to be any hiding on the back, but so the backplate unfortunately doesn't look like it's really going to get utilized, but it I guess looks better. It's just like, is that really the best place to spend an extra few dollars on this? Kind of depends. Intel runs the risk. You know, this is not their card. They didn't make this board or the cooler, but Intel does kind of run the risk of looking like they're trying to make up for quality with just building a bigger card or something, depending on how they execute their own models. So that'll hinge on performance. So that's it. The back is very simple. There's some MLCCs. Now, other than these MLCCs around the board, they also have a symbol that says "Don't throw it in the trash," and hopefully this one. Oh wow, this one doesn't have that same symbol. So for the backplate, it is actually a metal backplate. Feels like aluminum. It's just there's no use of the surface area here. So unfortunately, when you talk about making use of it, well, it's just kind of for looks in this instance. So that's the backplate, but what the What the hell is that? Okay, so that's it for the teardown of the Arc A380 GPU. It's the first Intel GPU I've ever taken apart. Technically, there was a Larrabee GPU at one point as well. I don't remember when. It was a long time ago, and I've never seen one in the wild. So that's it for the A380. We'll look at other GPUs as they come out. This is not a review of the card itself. Obviously, you'll want to go to our performance review and benchmarks for all of that to learn more about how it actually performs, if it's worth buying or not. From an assembly standpoint, it's better than some of the other, most of the other $150 cards we've seen. This is not even supposed to be that high. I don't know. They're not on retail markets here yet, so we'll see. But at least for the cooling solution and the card overall, it is on the higher quality side for a sub $160 card. So that's it for this one. Thanks for watching as always. To support us directly and our independent testing and deep dives, you can go to store.gamersnexus.net and grab things like the mod mat I worked on or our toolkits for GPU teardown and disassembly. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more. We'll see you all next time.